This is the Truth Frequency Radio Network.
We are TFR.
Truth Frequency Radio.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Covert Report with Susan Lindauer. We have a fascinating show today. A few weeks ago, Catalan held an independence vote, a referendum. The people of the country came together, the people of the region came together and voted to secede from Spain. And I've been looking for someone, you know me, I've been looking for someone who knows the issue, who's involved in the issue, who could talk about it at a personal level. And I have now found the wonderful David Raventos, who is one of the leading activists in the independence movement. And he's going to explain what's happening and the whole, this is a dramatic shift for Spain. The referendum was approved, but there was lots of violence. The Spanish have sought to suppress it. There's so much action. Could you start just by telling us very briefly where Catalonia is, just very quickly, so that people get a sense of how Catalonia fits into the geography of Europe?
Well, Catalonia is located to the northeast of what would be considered the Spanish state. And it's a very relevant part in Europe because it's full of European companies, and it's the way to connect Spain to the rest of Europe. So it's economically, geographically, and historically is very relevant. So it's Spain cannot afford to lose Catalonia without going back a few decades, if not centuries.
Okay, and as I understand it, it's Catalonia is the northeast corner of Spain that is bordered by France and Andorra to the north.
You're perfectly right.
Okay, and the Mediterranean to the east. Okay, yes. So it's got coastal borders to the Mediterranean, and it's bordering France. So it's in the eastern part of Spain. So if Catalonia seceded, would Spain hold any borders with France, or would that be totally gone?
Well, they would have some borders, but the borders are from Navarra and Euskal Herria, which is also a nation under Spain, and they have their own pro-Indi movement. So in the near future, there might not be borders between Spain and France if both Catalonia and Euskal Herria succeed from Spanish state.
Oh boy! Okay, that's always an issue.
Yeah.
Who your neighbors are is always an issue in these fights. Now, the history is that again, very very briefly. I don't want to spend too much time on the history, but originally Catalonia was its own country.
Yes, well, Catalonia, we are. I'm not going to give a lot of historical things because I'm not super expert.
That's okay. It's more relevant to talk about what's happening right now.
Because
but just so that people can understand.
The question is, we were independent for 1,000 years. Then 300 years ago, there was like some fight between Castile, which is what now more or less is Spain, and Catalonia, with two different contenders to the Spanish throne. And that brought France and Castile together, and they defeated the Catalans in 1714. So we've been subjugated for around 300 years now. And then this has meant that there's some saying the way to keep Catalans down is to bomb Barcelona every 50 years. And the last time we had something serious violently was Franco 80 years ago, which was a way to keep the Catalans down as well. And nowadays they cannot use violence the way they love to use it. So they have to use other means like infiltration and deception to reach the same objectives, but in a different way.
Okay, now, before we get into the deception that you're talking about, let's talk a little bit about Franco, because Franco was a fascist, and Franco was a true fascist. He that was his method of government was fascism. That was his political ideology, correct?
Yeah. Yes, he was, Phalangism, which was a branch of fascism. But the question is, he was allowed to. He gave a military coup in 1936. Then, after 3 years of civil war, which is not technically civil because it was more or less like uprising army against the population, but after 3 years, he established a dictatorship which caused hundreds of thousands of deaths from 1939 to 1975. And during that period, you cannot speak Catalan in public. There's people who received fines, and Catalans have had, a lot of them had to go into exile. A lot of them went to prison, and a lot of them were executed because, that's one of the objectives.
A lot of them were executed. That is a very important point. Franco was a fascist who, with an iron fist, who routinely arrested and tortured and imprisoned people and killed them. He was an ally of Hitler, correct?
Yes, correct. That's totally correct.
Okay,
they even sent some
after Hitler. While Hitler was defeated, Franco persisted through the 70s.
Yes, well, we're not going to go into it because then it might get very complicated. But you know what geopolitics is. So somebody might be your enemy today, but that changes from one day to the other. So I think Franco was convenient to avoid the expansion of communism or things that were not well seen from West. So he became a convenient nuisance, I think. That's why he was allowed to be in power for so long.
Okay, but Catalonia was a major thorn in his side, correct? And Catalonia fought against Franco's dictatorship.
Yes. We always considered ourselves to be an independent nation that has been taken over by the use of weapons or arms, not in any democratic way. So that's when it's funny when they say it's not democratic to have a referendum. People joke saying, yeah, you were incorporated by a peaceful war and now you want to succeed by a violent referendum, which is kind of a bit of a mockery on itself. So
yes. That's a mockery. You were subjugated by a peaceful war, and now you went out. You were to secede by a violent referendum, an election. Yeah, they always support democracy until democracy works against them. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so bring us to the past 20 years. As you said, the movement for but the thing is that even under Franco, you were trying to get out.
Yes, it was. There were some movements with people singing in Catalan, but the nation has survived 300 years. So no matter how things go, the question is, at the time when the big states in Europe were formed in the 19th century, like I would say, I don't know, Germany or France or Italy were made, Spain didn't manage to make it, didn't manage to assimilate the Catalans. So now things cannot be done in a way. I mean, some things were accepted in the 18th or 19th century when it comes to violence or this way to annexionate nations, but that's not seen the same way nowadays. So there's always been a fight because Catalonia won't stop till it becomes a full nation again. So there's always going to be tension until the Catalans succeed. It's not something you can put under the carpet and it will go. This will only finish when Catalans regain our statehood. The question is, when Franco died, there was a mockery of what they call peaceful transition. So nobody went to prison. Nobody had to give back the money they had stolen. Nothing changed. So they kind of made up the dictatorship, but more or less the same people stayed in power. And there's a saying that encapsulates that, which is, we left everything in tight and really well tight, meaning that no matter what Catalans wanted, there's some superstructure or there's some undergoings here that keeps us under control. As in, it's a Francoism without Franco, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, the tradition of fascism persists despite the death of Franco.
Yes, it's not prohibited to. I mean, it's the only country in Europe where you can have pro-Franco associations, marches. Franco Association receives public funding from Spanish state, which is something that I don't think you could do in Germany or in Italy. So They gave some social rights, but there's an underlying fascism. I mean, Partido Popular, we don't have an ultra-right party in Spain because it's included in the main governing party. So they don't need their own party because they are running Spain.
Okay, that's actually very significant. But I want everyone to know that the Catalan separatism has been around for more than 100 years. This is not something that is brand new. Really, this is not something that just emerged like the state of California deciding they don't like President Trump and they'd like to leave the union. Thank you. Have a nice day. That's not what's going on. Catalan has been fighting for independence since the 1850s. Okay, and that was after they were subjugated in the 1700s. So it took about 100 years, and then by the 1850s they were back at it again, and it's never stopped. For 150 years, 170 years, they've been fighting to. This has been a constant push, and about every 50 years it gets violent. So now, we had Franco in 1930s, and that was this the Spanish Civil War? Is that really what this was? Was the fight between Catalan and the rest of Spain? Is that the source of the Spanish Civil War? Pardon my ignorance.
Not only. There were other factors, like that the 30s were a peculiar time in Europe with the rise of communism and fascism and Nazism, and so there was a fight between what we could call the right wing and left wing. Also in Spain, it's complicated because the church was siding with this Franco, and there were a lot of things.
The church sided with the fascists?
Totally. It's the church with Opus Dei and other. The church sided with Franco because that it was quite radicalized, because the left was, nowadays we think also through infiltration. They were burning churches and scaring people that went to mass. So there were a lot of factors, and it would be unfair from me to say that it was Catalan against Spain, but it was one of the main factors, because Catalonia had briefly declared independence, like for 1 or 2 days in 1931, and then it was reversed, which is a bit of what we've seen this last month as well. So that first they say that history appears as a tragedy, and then the second time comes as comedy or farce, something like this. So we had a bit the tragedy in the 30s, and we've had the farce of 2 declarations of independence that were fake. So everything is not that new around here.
So first history appears as tragedy, then it appears as comedy.
Yes, something like this. We've had some things that are incredibly difficult to explain unless you realize that everybody who's running the pro-Indi side is actually working for the Spanish side.
My God. Total infiltration.
Well, infiltration, I use the term a lot because I should say that I don't only pretend to be a whistleblower, but we're organizing people, and we're going to be the movement that's going to declare independence. So I need to use the term infiltration to be pedagogic, because we have to awake millions of people to very hard reality. It's not even infiltration. We have the idea of infiltration when we can imagine, I don't know, in the Cold War, United States and Soviet Union. So we have 2 powers which have the means and counterintelligence measures. So to infiltrate somebody, I don't know, like the Filbe case, it's a success, and it's very difficult because you have lots of counterintelligence trying to avoid you to infiltrate universities. But when you've been occupied for 300 years, it's not even infiltration. It's you go to universities when you're Spain, you pick up the people that are talented and lack the honesty to work undercover, and you plant them. And then when the situation is that Catalonia is about to get independence, which we can talk about what the alarms were for Spain, there were some alarms in year 2009. And that meant that Spain had to, all these plans they have running Catalan society, they needed to be pushed to the top to make sure that they would murder Indi from the inside.
So they could murder it from the inside, murder independence. Oh boy.
Well, there's nothing. I don't think there's anything better, and no matter how many millennia go, there's no more effective ways to win a war that every general, colonel, or major, or person in charge of the enemy army works for you, is it? Because then it's impossible
No.
they can defeat you. That's what we're talking about
Yes.
here. And I've known some of these people for 25 years, and it took me 21 years to realize that I needed to put the Spanish cassock under the Catalan cassock they're supposed to be wearing to understand all their shenanigans for 20 years, where they've been breaking and setting up parties and attacking one another in public, and then kissing and giving hands after a few months, and all these things that don't make sense. When you realize we're talking about infiltration big time, then everything became crystal clear.
Ah, ha, 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 ha. Oh, my goodness. So you can't trust anyone who you're working with. Oh, boy. Wow. Well, let's talk about what has just happened, because let's bring this into the most recent elections and tell everyone how those came about, because Catalan has some autonomy as well, even today. But let's talk about the actual elections, the referendum.
Well, if we can go, if you allow me to go a couple
No,
of years or
please.
before
Yeah, go.
that,
Yes,
the
yes.
things started getting heated when there was an agreement for a new covenant or a statute, which is what is the legal relation between Spain as a whole and Catalonia as an autonomous region. Catalans were unhappy, so we gave ourselves a new covenant. But that covenant was destroyed by Spanish Constitutional Court, and we actually went backwards. That created a big discontent in Catalonia, and the first thing to happen was that the people started having non-binding referendums in their own municipalities. So more than that was later. I apologize,
Oh,
but
that's okay. That's okay. Everybody, we're back.
okay. So
I
some
don't know.
weird things happened with my communications for the last 4 years. So
Okay, okay. There we go. There we go. Okay. Well,
there's
we
a lot of
didn't lose.
people.
We lost a few minutes, but we're okay. Everything's
I
okay.
okay. I'll pick up.
Let's just pick up from where we were. That's good.
Yeah. The question is they've needed to control all these alarms, so they created fake independentist party, fake grassroots organizations. They made people rich on top. And then we finally had some elections in 2015, which should have delivered independence because we got a majority and we gave them a mandate to declare independence. But they lied to us saying that they didn't have enough of a majority. So they pushed us towards a referendum. That is the referendum that was held in 2015. In October 1st.
Okay, October 1st was the referendum, but
Yes.
okay, so the referendum was October 1st, and we're actually about to come up to the break. So right after the break, I want to talk about the referendum, but let's explain a little bit about the autonomy you've been living under.
Well, we are supposed to have some things about education and some minor things. But then there's always a lot of conflicts on who has the competence to do what. And everything is given to a constitutional court where Catalonia is not represented. So actually it's like fascist court deciding always against the interest of the Catalans in matters cultural, educational, economic. We are being plundered by 10% of our gross domestic production, which is about 3 times bigger than the constitutional court in Germany deems acceptable to avoid that the Catalan economy stalls and goes in reverse. So there's a situation that doesn't allow Catalonia to survive under the Spanish yoke.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Covert Report. I apologize for the break we had there. We had a technology interruption from Spain. We are speaking with David Raventos, one of the leading activists for Catalonia's independence from Spain. He is a major thorn in Spain's side, and he is the closer you get to success, the harder they fight back. And the mainstream media, as we all know, has been shutting down information about Catalonia's quest for independence and its determination to achieve independence, which actually is not new. They've been fighting for independence since the 1850s. But David Raventos is one of the leaders in the movement today, who is battling infiltration, psyops, psychological operations to undercut, to the infighting. They have plants inside, spies everywhere inside his movement. He has been locked up in prison. They've made up terrible, ugly stories about him, which we'll come to later on. But first, I want to talk about the recent past 20 years, because you have appealed to the European Union, and the European Union sided with you. They had election monitors from the European Union who were outraged. And tell people what happened just in October when you held the referendum. Remind everyone about this, because this was an appalling thing that they did. The Spanish authorities came in to do.
Well, first of all, I would like to explain that referendum was not necessary, because in 2015 we gave a straightforward mandate to our parliament to declare independence in the next 18 months. And surprisingly, Antonio Baños, one of the winners, broke a record in history by somebody who had just won an election lying against himself and saying they hadn't won. Okay, so that's the first thing. This referendum, a lot of independentists, we didn't want it. Actually, we wanted declaration of independence before that. But, we were forced to play this referendum. And
so wait a minute. So okay, you were forced to do the referendum, but you had already voted in the Catalonian parliament, in your own parliament, to secede. The parliament had voted.
Yes, we voted people in with the mandate. They went to an election saying, if we have a majority in parliament, we'll declare independence the next 18 months without referendum. But then they inserted this referendum that lots of us didn't want, and they forced us to go to a referendum, because referendums are a perfect way to murder independence while pretend to respect democracy. We've seen it in Quebec and we've seen it in Scotland. So a referendum, as I've been saying since 2014, is the perfect way to pretend you respect democracy, as long as you can rig the referendum and the result is preordained.
Okay, as long as it's preordained that you're going to be defeated. Now,
yes.
briefly, let's talk about the Scottish referendum, because you referred to that.
Yes, well, the British system has some shortcomings that make it open to rigging in ways that we would only think possible in third world countries. Because the three basic things to guarantee some electoral system is that you do exit polls, so the results more or less add up to what people have said. To have a chain of custody, so the ballots are constantly controlled by both sides in the election, and that the votes are counted locally. Because, I don't know, if it's a little village, everybody knows you're for independence, it's very impossible that the votes are going to come for no. But if you see how it was done there were not exit polls, which is weird. There was totally no chain of custody. And not only that, but the ballots were put uncounted in vans of the company Idox, whose CEO for UK is Peter Liley, which was a member of the Tories in London. So it beggars belief that this would be conducted by such a staunch unionist would get the ballots in vans without having been counted. And
so what they did, so what you're saying is that it like we in the United States would have a precinct, and we call them precincts. And when the ballots are counted, like at the local high school, the ballots are cast at the local high school, for example, then they're counted at the local high school. And the local high school, which is the precinct for the for the community, tallies up all its votes, and then the local high school precinct reports its votes upwards to the state, for example.
But not in the Scottish referendum. The Scottish referendum, there's nothing to prove that the votes that the people casted are the votes that were counted. As you know, as Stalin said, it's not the votes that count, but who counts the votes.
Yes.
So
yes.
we are certain that people casted some votes, but those votes were highly probably destroyed.
Yes.
And the votes that reached the counting offices were other votes. And that's why all the tiny things we've seen about votes being put in the wrong amounts and stuff, those are psyop to take our eyes off that the big referendum happened before reaching there.
Yeah, and here's something that was documented on video, because what the Scottish independence people were very upset about what you just said. They knew it was wrong. They were worried about it. They were waiting for this, and so they stood there with cameras, like cell phone cameras, surreptitiously videoing the counts. And these were big pieces of paper that said, yes, no, in, out, something like that, but you could see it on the page. And what would happen is they'd put them, the people counting them would take yes votes, and it would be like big pieces of paper that said yes or no, and they'd put them in the no category. So they'd see that they'd have a pile, yes and no, and they'd look at the piece of paper, and they'd whatever it said, they'd automatically put it into the no pile. Okay, so this was actually documented by video. That's documented. That's what they did in Scotland, was that they had people counting them, and they had this all over the counting. They had people with videos documenting, and they'd look at it and they'd say it says yes, and then they'd put them into the no pile. It was an amazing voter fraud, and now the Scottish instead of the Scottish leaders, some of them accepted the referendum, but some of them have challenged it in court and said that the ballots should be. I don't know if the ballots were destroyed or not. This is the question mark. But they've taken those videos of the evidence showing that the yes ballots are put into the no pile just automatically, just boop, doop, 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 on and on and on, and just over and over and over again, this happening. And they're saying that there is voter fraud here. There's actual fraud, and we want a new referendum that will have protections in place for counting the ballots. So they're challenging it.
If I comment something on this, what you just said, is it okay?
Yes, please.
But what you've said being true, that's only the classic smoke screen to hide something much bigger. So the fraud happened in transit on the way to the polling stations. So what we've seen, it's peanuts compared to the big operation of changing the ballots on the way there, because the votes were conducted there with no chain of custody and by a company called IDOX, as I said before, which belongs to a member of the Tories. So what we've seen, to me, it's like what they call the prestige in illusionist tricks. They focus that, which being bad is nothing compared to the fact that the ballots were exchanged. I'd like to comment something which smells of insider trading. More or less, the official information was that everything was split even. Okay, more or less, it was 50 on each side before the referendum. Well, there were some people that were betting £900,000 from London to get only 1/3 in return on something that officially was even. If you ask anybody who knows anything about betting, it means they knew in advance that it was going to be a no. Because why would somebody bet £900,000 on something which is supposed to be a head or tails thing, to either lose £900,000 or only get £300,000 in return? Nobody would do that if it's not because of insider information, insider trading. I don't know if I explained myself.
Explain that a little bit. You're talking about the Scottish referendum.
Yes, in the Scottish referendum, there were a lot of polls saying that the outcome was split even, 50-50. Okay, to that point?
Yes.
Then the bets didn't reflect that. The bet should have been paying more or less equally the yes or no. But
Gotcha.
but it was 3 times more better paid the yes than the no. It means that they knew if they gave even odds, they would have been bankrupt, because a lot of people in the city of London knew beforehand it was a no, even though the published polls said it was 50-50. And some people put £900,000 on something which is supposed to be head or tails.
Wow.
Why would somebody put £900,000 in a supposed fair heads or tails thing, only to get 300,000 if it wins and to lose 900,000? You only do that if you know. That's what we're talking about. It's insider trading. Everybody in the world knew it was going to be a no, except the people of Scotland that was betrayed by the ones they love. How can you lead Scotland to independence when Nicola Sturgeon, Alex Salmond, and Angus Robertson are members of the Privy Council of the Queen of England? That smells a bit of a conflict of interest, if you ask me, isn't it?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, my.
So they have to pretend they want independence, but never get you there. I read the book of Alex Salmond of the 100 days before the referendum, and it's named The Dream Shall Never Die. Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Salmond, but for some of us, the independence of Scotland, of Catalonia, is a dream we will make come true. Not a dream to live from and get fat chicks and doing programs and living from independentism.
Yes. Yes. Well, what you're saying, I can understand now why you say first history appears as tragedy, then it appears as comedy. Yes, because it's a farce that they're exploiting the referendums, but what they did in Spain now, what they did to you in Spain, tell everyone about that, because they violently attacked. They didn't just, Spain came in and violently attacked the voters. They physically attacked them. They arrested the voters.
Yes, they physically attacked people. There's 900 people wounded. One person has lost one eye because of rubber bullets being shot. But the worst thing is, you would expect if that happened, you would try not to do that in front of television cameras, isn't it? Normally nowadays you try to do it in a way that doesn't show. Well, my experience and to my knowledge, it was the contrary. They hit harder where there were cameras, because the objective is that the violence would be known, because they need to force international mediation so we can have one of these referendums to murder independence. So things are, when we talk about PSYOP, that's what it is. They hit harder where the Catalan president, Carles Puigdemont, was supposed to cast his vote, which meant that the violence would be picked up by the cameras that normally are in these places. And everything smells of the violence is real, but there's something behind it, which is they want to force tension, to force international mediation, to have an agreed referendum, to murder Catalan independence in 2019 in the Scottish-style referendum.
Oh, boy. Yeah. Oh. Did the president of Catalan independence movement, was he arrested? Some of these people were actually physically arrested and taken into prison, taken into custody, I thought.
Yes, no, they are. But the question is, if I can allow, well, we've known, if I can mention it briefly.
Please.
It's a small program that it's not going to shadow yours. But as we said in Radio Hadrian, in K Radio, we were doing a program just 2 hours after the Declaration of Independence was supposed to be made, the 27th of October. And I said, I don't want to be somebody breaking the joy at this moment or a killjoy, but this Declaration of Independence won't hold because we are run by traitors. And then the next step Spain will do, and I'll repeat it if it seems weird. Spain has to protect the traitors that didn't declare independence. So they've had to put them in prison, and some of them have to pretend they're in exile, but that's to avoid that people might realize that we've been hacked. They declared fakely independence twice in a month. So they have actually avoided Catalan independence. So if you declare independence fakely, the repression you get is also fake. The whole thing now is to protect the traitors, and the way to protect the traitors by reverse psychology or PSYOP is that Spain has to pretend they're being attacked, but in fact they're national Spanish heroes.
Oh, wow, that is heavy. That is heavy. So so they are showing that they're playing that they are heroes to their own people in Madrid.
They pretend to be heroes of the Catalan in the movement, but actually they're murdering independence from the inside. But to avoid the normal people to put two and two together and realize they're traitors, Madrid has to attack them to make Catalans love them. I don't know if I explained myself.
Explain that more. Explain that in more depth. You're saying that Spain that I think what you're saying is that Spain has chosen these people.
Yes, they've been infiltrated.
Spain has infiltrated the autonomy movement, the independence movement, and Spain infiltrated the independence movement and sort of chose and raised up the leaders that they wanted.
Yeah, so they would. Yes.
They preferred those leaders, so they raised them up, and now they make them look like martyrs.
Yes, but it's plan of an operation that lasts at least 20 years. If I can explain that, in the case of Carles Puigdemont,
please explain.
Carles Puigdemont set up a newspaper. I don't know if it's part of Operation Mockingbird, but it's similar to that. He set up a newspaper called Catalonia Today in English in 2004. He set it up with none other than Stephen Bergen, which used to work for the Times of Rupert Murdoch at the time. So it's a peculiar choice when you are the guy that are supposed to bring us to independence. And this guy has been siding with unionists and has done rabid articles even in The Guardian and lots of things against independence. So it's peculiar that Puigdemont would be the hero to independence. But we have to say that he reached the mayor of Girona because of the contendant of his own party received death threats, he and his family. So the guy that was supposed to be mayor of Girona had to step down because he was threatened to death, him and his family. So Carles Puigdemont was one step closer to being president. Then in 2015, he was put in charge of some association of municipalities for independence because the guy in charge quit in advance, saying that he was quitting politics. But then he kept doing politics, so it was a lie. And then after that, we have somebody saying they didn't win the elections. Carles Puigdemont was not supposed to be president. Artur Mas, the previous president, was supposed to stay put. Then we have evidence of a Spanish double agent making thousands of calls to make some shenanigans happen. And then a minority party is supposed to have had an assembly that finished in a draw where 1,515 people voted yes and 1,500 people voted no. And that incredible thing, and we know it didn't happen because we've spoken with people who were there, it was a farce. And then 66 people decided that Carles Puigdemont, out of nowhere, was supposed to be the president of Catalonia. Well, if I had to risk my life, I would say he's an infiltrator. When later, twice he declares fakely independence in the month of October, the 10th on 27, well, for me it's clear. He has been groomed by Spain so he could murder independence from within. As I said once, only the one you believe in can betray you. Only the one you listen to can lie to you. And only the one that is close to you can stab you in the back. You need to say
wow. Yeah. You're right. Absolutely.
That's how they defeat us. That's how they defeat us. I think it comes from medieval times. People were afraid of another landlord, but it was your own landlord that was taking money from you or raping your wife or all these things. So we're always afraid of the foreign enemy, but lots of time it's our own government that betray us.
Oh yes, it's the one who's close to you who stabs you in the back. The one who listens to you who is the one who's going to lie to you.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that is pure psychological operation. That is true infiltration. So how do you know who to trust? That is the biggest force of destruction right there.
But now what we're doing
they get you fighting amongst each other.
Well, but now if you come to think of it, with the sentence with Franco died, but actually he left everybody in place because nobody went to prison. So what we've learned to think now is basically we trusting nobody who we see on television on who's public figure. Okay, the question here is there's a majority of Catalan people for independence, but that won't happen if they are behind flutists or pipers that work for the enemy. So actually, we are setting up a movement which have its own political party, a documentary telling the truth, our tiny radio station or program now, and we're trying to set up a digital newspaper. And actually, we are advocating...
That's a great idea. That's a great idea.
We're advocating a change of, I don't know if the English, sorry for my English, this is a challenge for me. I don't know if you can say a change of paradigm.
It's great English. Your English is great. Yeah, no problem.
It's a change of system. Okay, the Catalan resistance I belong to, we don't accept nothing that happened since 1975. We think that to be a Truman Show, and it's something I say very often. Everybody in the Truman Show have to be an actor, even the guy selling the newspaper to Truman. I don't know if you're familiar with the film.
Remind everybody about the Truman Show.
The Truman Show is a film where a guy, unaware of it, has been adopted by a television corporation. So his whole life is a live show, but he doesn't know. So his wife, best friend, everything around him is an actor, a paid actor. But then once a girl enters the set and tells him everything in your life is a lie, and then he starts realizing that this is what we think we're living in Catalonia. Every media we think to be for independence, every grassroots leader, every politician works for Spain. And that's the only way they have managed to neutralize 3 million people who want independence. It doesn't matter you have a lot of millions of independents if you have none of them in parliament. So that's what we're trying to revert. We are disconnecting people from this Truman Show of Catalan politics, and we're bringing to our new boat, which is the independent reality. And that's what we're going to do. And that's what I'm going to do as far as I have a breath in me and as far as nobody stops me.
Nobody stops you. And we're after the break, I want to talk about what they've done to you, because I think that it's you are so brave. You were so generous, and I was very deeply moved by your by your comments about my story. But I will say that what you are doing is historic and it's seismic shifting, and the sacrifices that are required for these for independence and freedom. This is the highest price that you pay, and you have been paying it. We saw, in the first half hour of the show, at the very end, close to the break, they tried to interrupt our communications. They might do that again, but we are not deterred. We are not deterred at all.
Because
not at all. But I tell you that that I have tremendous admiration for what you're going through and for the struggle that you have faced. And again, everyone, Catalonia, this is not a modern movement that only existed 5 years ago or 6 months ago. This is something that has been 100 years in the making. The people of Catalonia have already fought a war against Franco in the 1930s. The Spanish Civil War is what they called it, and Ernest Hemingway went and wrote about it. There was a huge movement in the United States to go fight in Spain's Civil War as people went to stand against the fascists. Franco was a declared fascist, a true authoritarian, iron fist. He raped, he tortured with impunity. That was his style of rule. If you spoke against the government, you disappeared. They imprisoned you. They killed your family. They just went in and massacred people. And he didn't even deny it. He was, even after Hitler fell, and Hitler and Mussolini fell, Franco persisted until 1975. And so Catalonia they've paid in blood for trying to get out of Spain. And it's not something that just happened, a few weeks ago or last year or 2 years ago. This is a constant battle of Catalonia to get out. We'll be right back after the break. And my microphone was not working. I was talking the whole time. Hello, I apologize for that. I was giving an introduction, and apparently it was not coming through. We are having technical challenges from Spain, I think. Right before the break, I just got an email. I didn't even know that we were having trouble until Lucky said, Susan, we're not hearing anything you're saying. And I was here talking the whole time. So this is an issue of, we're talking with David Raventos, one of the leading activists in the Catalonian independence movement. And Spain is going all out to fight and block and attack and sabotage the independence movement. Right before what you didn't hear me saying was a description of the extreme violence that Spanish authorities initiated against the voters in the referendum on October 1st. Spanish authorities sent soldiers to the voting places and fired guns at these people. They stole the ballot boxes. They went in riot gear, full riot gear with AR-5s, AR-15s, and automatic weapons with rubber bullets, perhaps, but still tear gas, firing on these people, arresting the voters, stealing the ballot boxes. It was violent and bloody, and they did everything they could to scare people away, and yet the people came to vote, and they still turned out to vote. They would not give up. And it is a remarkable thing. A lot of people in Madrid perhaps hoped that the death of Franco would be the end of the Catalonian independence movement. Franco had of course, as you have said, David Raventos, our guest, had already had a long history of infiltrating the independence movement, fighting them, labeling them terrorists, though they are not terrorists. These are people who are an independent culture. They have their own language. Even in Spain, they have their own language. They've always had a history of autonomy, and it's just that there must be the independence is an inevitability. Now, let's talk briefly, because you had gone to the European Union as well, and how has the European Union dealt with this issue?
Well, the problem with European Union is a club done of member states. So the member states at this point is Spain. And the way I see things, they all play on the same sides. I made a video 3 years ago which says how everybody is together on this. The Catalan government, Spain, and European Union, none of them wants independence, because that would bring, Juncker said it himself, I don't want to run a Europe done of 90 statelets. So European Union needs to keep friendly with Spain, and the solution to this probably will be an agreed referendum to which violence was the excuse for. So if you have violence, that's going to bring European Union or some international organization to force people to mediate. That possibly is going to happen after the elections of the 21st of December. So violence served three purposes here, and I would like to explain briefly. It's very brief.
Please.
The violence of the 1st of October first gives the idea that Catalan government and Spanish government are not in cahoots, which is what they are. Secondarily, it gives the reason for European Union to intervene and mediate. And the mediation will bring about a Scottish-style referendum that Catalans will lose, and that will be the end of the story. But third and fourth, that violence has been used by some top Catalan so-called pro-independentists to justify the fact that they pretended to declare independence, but they didn't declare independence. And they needed this violence the 1st of October, because later they have said that there would have been tanks and death on the street had they declared independence. So they needed this thing happening on the 1st to be credible when they would try to hide their treason. And finally, this violence in the streets and also companies that have been moving away from Catalonia is the beginning of the fear campaign, because in a year or 2 years' time, the real referendum is going to happen. And when the real referendum is going to happen, the fear of what happened the 1st of October will make that a lot of people don't go to vote or vote for no, because we thought they've given us the idea that this was the smile revolution. How can you live with smiles with a country with Franco, Inquisition, the American genocide? You cannot live a country like that with smiles. That was to deceive us. So when violence would hit, everybody would be like it is now. People are disoriented, shocked, depressed on the indie field because they want to murder independence forever, not just for 5 minutes.
You mentioned there's a vote in December too?
Yes, and if I can explain this, the question was, supposedly Catalan government declared independence the 27th of October in Parliament, but nothing of what should have happened, like writing it in the official newspapers, bringing down the Spanish flag.
Okay, now hold on. Let's go through this timeline. On October 1st, because I'm in America.
Sorry.
I'm in America, so we don't know the full history here. On October, no, that's okay. On October 1st, there was a referendum, and the people voted, and Spain smashed it up and was violent, very violent. Stole the the ballot boxes, went in with machine guns at a polling place. This was scary stuff. They shot people. They used tear gas against them. This was really frightening. And there were European observers there. I think Jimmy Carter was there. The foreign observers of this election said that these people were very peaceful and there was no violence, and that they condemned Spain for coming in. But it was all done on camera. So as you said, the whole country saw it. The people in Spain saw it. The people in Catalonia saw it. And now they're going to think twice about voting. So in any future referendum. So on October 1st, there was the election. And what happened after that? Did they say they won or they lost the referendum? No. What happened then?
The referendum was won by about 90% to 10% on a voting of about 48% of people. And they were supposed to declare independence in the next 48 hours.
Okay, so the referendum, despite the violence, the referendum, this is what was so extraordinary. The people refused to leave the voting places. They kept voting. They brought in new ballots. They waited in line. When the Spanish tried to chase them off, the soldiers came. They stayed. They stood their ground. They had no weapons. I mean, it was an amazing statement, a testimonial to their commitment to freedom and independence, because they refused to get out of their line, even with the soldiers pointing guns at them and trying to drag them out of the polling places. They grabbed hold of the chairs. They grabbed hold of each other, and they were, and they refused to leave. It was an amazing thing to watch, and so. They persisted and they voted and they won by 90% to 10%. And then there was supposed to be a declaration of independence 48 hours later. What happened then?
Then they kept postponing things, as I had foreseen it would happen, because our leaders don't want independence, but they didn't know how to steal independence from us. So they postponed it for 9 days. Then there was a session of Catalan parliament, and something very mocking happened. They said that Catalonia deserves to be independent, but that they suspended the declaration immediately.
They
celebrating it for 8 seconds. For 8 seconds, people celebrated. They said, "We deserve to be independent," says the president. And then you see people cheering for 8 seconds, and then the bomb drop says, "But I decide to suspend the effects of this declaration." So no declaration of independence.
Who said that? Who is the one who?
The president of Catalonia, the one I told you before, how he's been infiltrated by 1,515 people drawing and people being threatened so he reaches power and all these things. This guy said, we suspend the effects on this. So actually, there's no Declaration of Independence.
Oh, so the man who you all were expected to trust, the man who was supposed to be the president of Catalonia when the independence succeeds, he says, "Oh, we've won, but we're not going to." But I've decided.
So we negotiate. We want to negotiate. It's the first time you win, and then you want to negotiate. I don't know. Can you imagine? I mean, somebody wins the Super Bowl after not having won it for 303 years, and then says, "Well, we've won, but let's negotiate what the outcome is." You don't negotiate when you've won unless you work for the enemy, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The quarterback saying, "I think we'll give the victory to the other team."
Yes, that's more. Yes, that's it.
Yes,
that's it. And then thousands of people on the fake profiles on social media and everybody in public media saying it was a master strike. So it's like the emperor's dress all over again. Yeah, they lie to you in your noses after 300 years. And then they start brainwashing everybody, saying it's a master strike of the president because it shows how mean the Spaniards are. And the ones who are seeing the truth are the ones considered to be mad or idiotic. It's been as bad as that. But that's what happened when you live in dictatorships.
As a master strike.
Yes,
what?
yes.
You've won, and therefore you've won. You've defeated your enemy. Therefore, you allow your enemy to stick around.
And they still sell it as a master strike, and we are not intelligent because we don't see it. It's like the emperor's tail that was naked, but it was supposed to be such a fine silk that only intelligent people could see it. But it's the same thing all over again. But in real life. And I'm the child here that is to say that the emperor's naked. And we're going to gather people around and we're going to declare independence, no matter how long it takes.
Well, now, but is there going to be another vote now?
Well, the story wasn't finished yet, because then for 2 weeks, Spain and Catalonia were clarifying if independence had been declared or not. It was a mockery in itself. Okay, you send a letter, say, we give the Catalan government certain days to declare if they declared or not. And then another letter coming, you would say that letters had died last century, but not. We have this love relationship through letters. And then finally, the 27th of October, 17 days after that, Catalan parliament is supposed to declare independence again. But then they read the Declaration of Independence, but they don't vote for it. They vote something else. They read part one. In part one, they put some intention of independence there. But then the president of Catalan parliament say, let's vote part two. And part two didn't include Declaration of Independence. So they lied to us in front of our noses twice in 17 days.
So the president just screwed you again.
Yes, twice in 17 days. And then nothing of what should have happened. That's what I was trying to get at before. When you declare independence, the Spanish flag should have come down. It didn't. You should proclaim this law in the official bulletin, like the Catalan law bulletin.
Sure. Yes, sure.
And no sportsmen quit Spanish teams. Spain was terminating contracts in Catalan officials and they were accepting it. No control of it was like a dream. But it's not. But the question is, Spain retorted with Article 155, which is also not what they should have done in the case. In this case, it would be a case of the state of alarm, siege, and exception, isn't it? So curtail and all these kind of things. But no, they do something very minor, which is an Article 155, which only takes control of certain things. So it's total mockery. They are in cahoots.
What does it take control of?
No, it disbands parliament and government, and they declared independence to the 21st of December. So the paradox is we are supposed to be the Catalan Republic now, but we are less than an autonomous community, because when we were an autonomous community, it's the Catalan government that declares Catalan elections. But here, Madrid says,
whoa, wait a minute. So let me, because again, I'm so sorry, but in America we are not connected.
I apologize if I'm not
clear. That's all right. No. It's not that you're not clear, but your European audiences and even in Britain, they would have a much deeper day by day understanding of how this has been breaking just in the past couple of months. So I have to make you walk through very slowly and carefully. So what he did, what the president of Catalan did, so prior to the referendum, you had an autonomous region, somewhat. You had some autonomy in Spain. And so the new prime minister, the president of Catalan, who had just won the election, suspends the parliament.
No, he suspends the independence, okay? Then after 17 days, he pretends to declare independence, but it was a joke. And then Spain takes over, saying, we have this Article 155 in the Spanish Constitution, so you don't have any autonomous power anymore, and we're going to have elections the 21st of December to clarify the situation in Catalonia and to bring things to normal again. So now we are less than autonomy because we run from Madrid like in Franco times. We've gone back in times 40 years.
Okay, so so Spain, Madrid has now come in and said, you have no more autonomy, and we're going to have elections on December 21st to resolve this issue once and for all. Now, on December 21st, what will be the vote? What is the vote? Is that a referendum on?
No. It's all a joke because you said
what is the vote on December 21st?
The vote now is supposed to be again autonomous elections, and the pro-Indi parties have said that they're taking away the unilateral declaration of independence of their program. So actually now we are voting to get the prisoners out of prison, to get this coercing Article 155 that controls Catalonia out of the way. And basically, it's the same thing we were chanting in 1975. We're supposed to have won independence, but we're back 42 years back in time. It beggars belief. It's a joke.
So what is... Okay, what is the question that will be put on the ballot? What will it say?
No, it's not a question. It's we electing Catalan parliament again. Like the parliament that is supposed to have declared independence has been disauthorized by Madrid. Okay. So now a new parliament has to be elected.
Oh, a new So Spain is demanding that you have a new parliamentary elections. Yes. Will independence candidates be allowed on that ballot?
They are allowed to be because, as I've been trying to explain, all the puppets in this show are run by Spain. So we have official Spanish puppets, and then we have Catalan puppets that are actually Spanish puppets. So we think that some Catalan-dressed Spanish puppet is going to be allowed to win this time. So the road for an agreed referendum that will be lost will be paved. We think that that's the road plan. We've been right for the last 4 years, so I don't see why we shouldn't be right now. They need something to break the stalemate. So they need to go towards an agreement for a referendum, which is the only way to murder the Catalan Indi movement. And that's going to happen after the elections of the 21st of December, which foreseeably is going to be a bit of a stalemate. Pro-Indi winning, but not decisively. So something will have to happen so they reach an agreement for a referendum in 2018 or 19. And then end of independence, game over.
Oh, but it won't be over, will it? It will, as you say, it will never be over.
Until
Spain
we win.
Is trying. It will never be over until you win. Now, I'd like to have you talk about the very dirty things, if you don't mind. If it's very painful to you.
No, I thank you for the opportunity because this story we know has been officially censored from every media in Catalonia, and we have it from several sources that they don't want to be named because they would run losing their jobs or worse. So thanks for the opportunity because this story cannot be broadcasted anywhere in Catalonia or Spain. So thanks a lot. Well, the question is, when 4 years ago I realized that things were not going right, we have to say that I shared responsibilities with several cabinet members of the government cabinet in Catalonia. So for 25 years, I didn't understand why they didn't do things properly. And then 4 years ago, I realized that they worked for the other side. So I'm not just, I was a more or less successful professional. I have a law degree, and I know these people from 25 years ago. So some might say that it's not this, that I chose this course, but this course chose me. And then when I started criticizing some things, out of nowhere, hundreds of profiles, hundreds of so-called friends started calling me, threatening me, insulting me in social media, because it was totally necessary that I would shut up, because otherwise the people in Catalonia might open their eyes to the truth. So, and what was relevant, and I might leave it here before the break, or we'll see, is they said to me, shut up because you are nobody. And that in time made me realize, and that answers your question, who should you trust? Well, we cannot trust nobody we see, because we live in dictatorship. And in dictatorship, you don't have nobody not belonging to the running dictatorship, running political parties or appearing in media. So when they said, shut up because you are nobody, then I realized, I said, well, everybody who's somebody, it either works for the bad guys, or has been blackmailed, or has been bribed, or it's dumb enough not to understand what goes on. So they have everything under control. That was very scary. And people that I considered to be my friends started calling me, saying, beware, because you're going to lose your job, your family, you're going to lose everything if you follow this fight. And then it was hard. I have to say I broke down in the shower and I was crying, because I realized that following my conscience was going to be tremendously painful, and it might bring problems to people I love. But then I realized that, it's my nature. So I cannot be Truman and realize everything I believe in is a lie and pretend I didn't see what I saw. So I decided I would march on, and I realized that there were going to be a lot of things, a lot of threats, and they kind of sent fake messages to everybody I know saying I was a sexual harasser. They have proposed to have sex with me if I forget politics. They have called people around me saying I have mental problems. They told me that if I didn't stop, they would bring me into mental place. And the most scary thing I would like to mention.
Yeah. They're trying to say there's something wrong with your thinking because it's pure fascism. It's total fascism. Oh my God.
There's something out of 1984.
Sorry, we're coming to the break right now. We'll be right back. This is David Raventos, and he's now talking about his personal sacrifice and struggles as he deals with these issues. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Covert Report. We're talking with David Raventos about he was a leading activist in the fight for Catalonia's independence from Spain. And David, right before the break, you were starting to tell us about what you have suffered and the attacks you have faced. You were describing accusations of sexual harassment, which they used to try to cut off to isolate you and cut you off from your friends. Tell us more about that, because this is something we're seeing playing out in the United States. It's one of those accusations that's so easy to make. There's no requirements for evidence. It's considered offensive. It's a moral, social crime not to believe the woman. So if the woman says it, well, it must be true. Whether or not it is, the consequences for a man's life, his career can be destroyed in a matter of hours, in the matter of an afternoon. And there's no burden on the woman to produce any evidence that it actually happened. But talk about this.
Well, when I started creating problems, the important thing to know is the hundreds of people attacking me all were supposed to be pro-Indi, which is what makes it more special. So it's not the official Spaniards or Unionists. It's people who are supposed to be pro-independence but actually are not, that were trying to silence me. So there was this woman that said, if you don't shut up about what you're saying, we're going to bring you to court for sexual harassment of, I don't know what woman said, but I said, I did nothing of the kind. And she said, oh, I like it. One of the ones that fight back said, if we don't have evidence, we'll invent it. And I said, well, go ahead, because I did nothing. And then they sent a letter about me saying that I had committed harassment and I was a sexual predator to every contact list in my Facebook. And there's people I've never spoken with since that. So I guess some people might have believed it because they wanted to isolate me every way they could. I spoke with somebody, but then there's a moment when you realize they have everything. So I tried the ombudsman here. I tried everybody, but nobody would help me. I was totally alone because I'm the one that needs to be silenced. So, but I decided to stay put. And then they went one notch higher. And they started, some guy pretending to be my friend said, beware, because what they would do is they would find some weak link in your family and they will have you in a mental place.
They cut you off. They cut you off briefly, right when you said that right when you see what I mean, people. This is what they do. This is Spanish interference. Please keep going, David, because they said that they would. You were saying that a weak family member could be persuaded to have you declared mentally incompetent. Oh, been there, done that. Yep, keep going. Tell everybody.
But prior to that, in something that is taken out of 1984 Orwell book, they asked me what I found the most scary thing that could happen to me. And then I said, the most scary thing to me would be to be forcibly put in a mental institution while I'm sane. And bang, that's what they did to me. My worst fear was done to me. After this guy said I should beware, they started asking if somebody knew some of my friends, if I had any, or family members, because for my own interest, I required to be put in a mental institution so nothing would happen to me. And for 3 years, I fought them. And in the end, when I was on a hunger strike to explain these things, when I went to hospital, they detained me there and they kept me there. And they really put me forcefully in a mental institution as they had threatened to do to me. But as you say in this song, I feel so, the song you have in the program of Thanks for Making Me a Fighter. Every one of the 62 days, I was forcibly drugged, chemically tortured, and mistreated there. I thought, this is going to make me stronger. This is going to make me a fighter. And when I come out, we're going to win this.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, sweetie. I've been there. I've cried those tears myself. It is the no. You are heroic and courageous, and what you have done, and the fight for freedom. Remember that, people. This is fascist Spain. This is a fascist society, a tradition that embraces fascism in politics, and Franco was a monster who tortured, who aggressively arrested and tortured and imprisoned the people he did not like. Their families were killed and threatened. They raped the women. The police would rape the women. This is things you can't even conceive outside of Nicaragua or El Salvador, but of course it's Spain doing it. So I guess the tradition that you see in the third world of Latin America comes from the Spanish. This is the people who gave us the Inquisition in the Middle Ages. Spain has a terrible, bloodthirsty history of, you talk about the poor American Indians. It was really the Columbus and the Spaniards and what they did to the Latin Americans are the most horrific stories out there, and it's the same people who did those things who do this to him, and who are fighting the Catalonians so violently and aggressively and brutally. So you are my hero, David Raventos. You are my hero, because what they have done to you, and the perseverance, the tenacity, that you have to stand completely alone, and you are fighting with no one on your side at that point. It is the most terrifying thing. It is terrifying. But the stakes are so high. The stakes are history. The stakes are real freedom. It's freedom that's in jeopardy. So thank you.
They all say if a cause doesn't have even one single person which is ready to die for it, it's not much of a cause, isn't it?
Yes. You have to be willing to, yes.
Our enemies are ready to kill us not to be free. So if not one of us is ready to lose something for it, then it's not a real contest, is it? I would like to go on about before because I got a bit carried away. When I realized that everything was a lie and that we live in dictatorship, and that that everything we believe in works for the enemy, it's important because José María Aznar, which is a Spanish prime minister of some years ago, which is very hated in Spain, he said, before Spain breaks, Catalonia will have to break. And that's typical imperialistic mockery. Because what he meant is that the TV station, the political party, the grassroots organization, the newspaper we love actually works for them. So everything we love is like a human shield to protect Spain. So now the enormous task that we are taking over us is we need to deprogram a whole society that has been programmed to love its enemies that work under the guise of being friends. That's the task we have to do. It's not only freedom, it's not only truth. Is we need to deprogram a society that has been made to love some people that work for the enemy. That's what we're trying to do, and that's what we're going to do. That's why I decided to do a hunger strike in 2016 to denounce that everything we love is not going to declare independence, and that's what they needed to forcefully lock me. In my 15th day of hunger strike, I went voluntarily to a hospital, and then the nightmare started.
You went voluntarily to the hospital, to a regular hospital.
I was at the 15th day of my hunger strike. So people around me said, in good reason, you better go to a hospital to check your levels because, well, my plan was never to die. My plan is, as we are supposed to live in a democracy, but we are not, if I manage to go into the 40th or 50th or 60th day, the pressure will break. I mean, they cannot act on me as if they cannot act like in Franco times. So if I reach television or radio, we're going to win this. So that's why they had to stop me reaching the 14th or 50th day by locking me. So when I reached the hospital, there was already a plan there to trap me.
Yes.
They took away my phone. They locked me in a box. They started cross-examining me with, I don't know, asking me if I saw green men or if I thought Elvis was alive. And I was condemned to set foot there.
Well, now let me ask you. I mean, I laugh, but it's not even slightly funny. Did they forcibly feed you?
After the question goes as follows: they had blocked me from making it to the mainstream media. I reached a hospital with a small support group, but they had to go. I went there, and then they start mocking me for doing a hunger strike. So me doing a hunger strike was equivalent of being mad to them. Yeah, so they made that very clear.
Yes.
Doing a hunger strike equals being mad. Okay, so no respect, no dignity, nothing. Secondly, a judge comes there and tells me that I'm going to be locked because I'm having a psychotic whatever. I'm bipolar. They kept changing it every day. They kept changing my medicines. It was like that. So when after 2 days they tell you that you being on hunger strike is equal to being mad, they tell you they're going to forcefully feed you through intravenous things and stuff. And then I realized it was a long fight. And considering that I hadn't made it to the media anyways, I thought it was better to start. I mean, they were going to feed me anyways because I said they would bring like strong people to immobilize me and force feed me anyway. So there was nothing I can do against that. I realized that you managed, I think, not to take these medicines, but they said they would forcibly bring people for me to take it. So I decided to get my energy back to keep fighting. That was my decision then.
That was correct. So they gave you a choice: either eat or you would be forcibly drugged.
Yes, and forcibly drugged and fed. So so at that point I realized that it wasn't millions of people waiting for my hunger strike because they had successfully blocked me from the outside world.
Blocked you. So the world didn't even. Yeah, I understand.
So I thought, like, I need to win this. I cannot. I need to win this battle to fight again. That was my decision.
Yeah, no. An old soldier lives to fight another day. Yes. Yes, I
They were going to
understand.
force feed me and force medicate me, they said. There was a judge that said, you need to stay here against your will. So for me, it was prison.
Okay, so after the judge issued that ruling, that decision, how long were you kept in the hospital?
62 days, but it was a judge, but I couldn't have a lawyer there. And it was a mockery. I had
You were
some
not
evidence.
allowed to have an attorney. Yep, they're terrified of the
Yeah.
law, of due process. It's amazing. What's really scary is how they deny you all the rights of due process that any other citizen automatically gets.
Yes. So it's easier than, yes, if you are a murderer, you have more rights than if you are a hunger striker defending the truth. That's the way I see it. And they didn't let me have access. In my phone, I had evidence that they had circulated prior to me going there. Some infiltrated people had been circulating in social media that I was mad before, and that I was coming in and out of a psychiatric ward, and that I was so wrong in the head that I could not even recognize people. They had started circulating that. So when the trap would close on me, everything would be consistent, you know?
Oh, yes, yes. Everything would be consistent. Oh, that's terrible. And these were people in the movement. So what is now what year was that?
Last year.
Last year.
And they picked me up the day my daughter was becoming 13. She was waiting for me at home, and I never showed up because I was locked up in a mental ward against my will.
Are you still married to your wife?
No, that changed 3 or 4 years ago. But she's been doing a wonderful job with our daughter because I've been doing the fight. But the person that got me through all this is my partner, who's now coming back to Australia, Delia Forrest. She was the only person, or the main person, that was keeping contact. She was working out without even speaking Catalan or Spanish, having to handle the terror of Spain. Well, I wouldn't have managed without her. And when we win independence, a big part of it, it's for her, who she is Australian Scottish, not even Catalan, but she will have done much more for the freedom of this country than most Catalans will ever do. So I think it's fair to say this here.
Yeah, no. Having one person, see, this is it. Having one person stand with you shows the power of the individual. You know, Margaret Mead, there's sort of a trite statement that she made that never think that, but it's so true. Never believe that they say that no. What is it exactly that she says? Never think that one person is not enough to change the world. In fact, one person is all there ever is. And that's paraphrasing it, but that's what it is. One person standing up changes everything. Everything changes in that moment. And because the rest of the world goes by and does nothing, but one person speaking out, one person saying, no, we are not going to tolerate this anymore. That is the most dangerous person, standing alone, saying this is wrong, it is not true, it is we're not going to tolerate it. And you see how all of a sudden that person becomes savagely attacked and brutalized. They try to make an example of you so that no one will come to your side. But what happens is that one person comes to your side, and then other people hear your story, and they come to your side, and then it becomes a movement. And that is what's happening with you and Catalonia's independence. And I am so sorry that they've taken away your autonomy, but Gandhi, the great Gandhi, said, first they ridicule you, then they fight you. Or no, I'm sorry. First they ignore you, then they ridicule you, then they fight you, then you win. And that is what happens. So you have been through, now they're in the fighting you stage. First they tried to ignore you. First they tried to ignore Catalonia's independence. Then they mocked you and they said, oh, you must be crazy if you think we should have independence. That is not working. Now they're fighting you. Then you win. So you cannot back down. all of these people who went out to vote. So what happens on December 21st now?
Well, in December 21st, we in our movement, which is growing now, we've given freedom of vote. Everybody votes whatever they want because it's already decided. We don't know what Spain has decided, but all the horses in the race work for Spain, either openly or in disguise. So what will happen is after that, there's going to be conversations and negotiations and everything to end up doing a referendum that will be lost. That's what we foresee will happen. And as we have been getting it right for the last 4 years, I don't know why it should be different now. The only way to murder, if I can summarize, the objectives of the powers that be in Catalonia are to avoid independence, but to do it in a way that is technically democratic, to keep all the moles running Catalonia in place so they can keep betraying us, to avoid contagion to other countries like Scotland could be, where they have been mocked and infiltrated the same way as here, and to murder independence forever and to mock us along the way. These 6 objectives are perfectly served by having people march on in millions for 6 years, having them win a referendum where they're hit, having fakely declared independence twice, and then finally bringing them to a lost referendum in 2019. The 6 objectives are fulfilled with a lost rigged referendum in 2019. So I have my reasons to believe that that's what they have in stock for us.
So they're saying they want to have a referendum in the year 2019?
Something like that. They've been working towards that for the last 8 years. What we had believed that has been a movement for independence has been actually a movement to stifle and murder independence in the long run. So the way to you cannot successfully finish an independence without a lost referendum. But to reach a lost referendum situation, you need to have a referendum first. The problem is Spaniards won't easily accept a referendum, while Catalan independentists, we think we've already won independence. So they need a gigantic PSI operation where they need to bring up 30 million Spaniards from no referendum position to a agreed referendum position, and they have to force down millions of independentists down from independence towards an agreed referendum. I don't know if I explained myself well.
No. Let me ask you this. Will Spain try to say that they should have the referendum on your freedom? Or will it only be you who has the referendum?
No, only us we would have the referendum. But the question is, they have been winning elections. They have been, how can I explain this? The objective of Spain is a lost referendum, but they needed to postpone it because independence was 40 points ahead in 2013.
Yes, sure.
They couldn't rig that referendum 6 years ago. So they have needed to boil us, like the quintessential frog that needs to be boiled little by little so it doesn't notice. So they have been moving us through the procedures of elections and rigged mock referendums for 6 years. We had to advance. We've lost that 40-point differences. And now they need to pretend they have been forced to a referendum because for 6 years, Spain has said no referendum. But they need a referendum to murder independence. I don't know how to explain this better. They need a referendum so they can rig it and murder independence. But they need international coercion because their own Spaniards have been told no referendum for 7 years because that was the way to postpone it. So now they need international pressure to say, we have been forced to agree to this referendum. But it's all a farce because international pressure, Catalan government and Spain, they all in cahoots and they all work together. And now they have to push us all. Spaniards have to be convinced that they need to accept a referendum, and pro-Indi people also have to be convinced to accept a referendum. So they need to play psyops on both sides. I don't know if I explained properly. I don't know how to.
No, I think that's good. That's a good explanation. That's a good explanation. And in the meantime, you're dealing with infiltration, psyops against you, your own planted leaders in the movement have been planted by Spain,
so we don't have a chance. Yeah, whoever we look to works for the enemy. So that's why we have to create our new parties, media, everything to break I remember this thing from Solomon Asch. I've learned a few things these last years by trial, mistake, and learning. But this experiment of Solomon Asch, where people in the 37% would lie if they have to face anonymous people lying. And that's why they need to silence our voice and our little program. And thanks so much. This is such a great day for me. I mean, being here by a host like you, I admire so much. It's one of the good things that have come out of these 4 bad years. We need to create our own structures because we only have the people. Only the people can save the people. And you mentioned Gandhi before. One of my favorite ones has been, the truth is the truth, even if it's defended by a minority, even if it's by a minority of one. And we started by being one, but we're gathering support every day because the truth is the truth. And the truth is that our side works for the other side. And that's normal because that's the best way to keep a nation subjugated after 300 years. You're not there 300 years for them one day to wake up and smiling cheerfully declare independence. That's not how states work. And I say it without resentment or without anger. I'm saying I'm one of the leaders of this movement, so we need to think strategically as intelligence officers do. So the objective of our enemy is to do this in that way, so we have to counteract that. And we're not going to accept any lost referendum. We keep building our movement, and when we are enough, we're going to declare independence with a new political party, a new media. That's what's I'm going to dedicate my life to.
A new media, that will help you tremendously. A freedom, an independence radio, independence newspapers, independence online presence, social media will do so much for you.
That's what we're trying to do, and we're sure we're going to make it, because if they didn't crush it when we were 1 or 3, they cannot crush us now because we're already hundreds or thousands. So you can go...
You're thousands, you're hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, no, we're millions in Catalonia, but lots of people are still connected to this fake process. So we need to unconnect them from this fake matrix and to reconnect them to people really fighting for independence. And it becomes exponential. When you're only 3 people, it's very difficult. But when you're already thousands of people listening to us in the radio station or something, we started to work. I said something while we were in the commercial. I received a WhatsApp of somebody I just met this week saying, I want to join the resistance. See, somebody who's a friend of somebody of a friend of somebody, none of which I knew 10 days ago. So from 10 days ago, we are already on a 3rd generation of people who are joining this movement. So I'm convinced that we're going to raise millions and we're going to win this.
Oh, yeah. No, I think you will. I think because freedom will not die. The need for freedom is just overwhelming, overpowering in the soul. And thank you so much, David Raventos, for joining us today. I am so grateful to you, and bless you. Stay strong. I would love to get you back. So thank you for joining me today. And you are a hero to us as well. Everyone, we'll see you next weekend.
Truth Frequency Radio is your #1 source for news and information without the hate, hype, and fear. We're proud to feature cutting-edge programs like The Anthony Pat Show, Radio Ranch with Roger Sales, Enemy Within with Tom Barnes, Quest for Truth with Ken and Scott, Secrets Revealed with Zen Garcia, Staunching Tyranny with Jim and Jeff Staunch, Agent for Truth with Joe Bannister, Quantum Connections with Lucky and Star, America's Evil Genius with Travis Cook, The Nathan Frazier Show, and dozens more. Did you know you can listen from any computer, mobile device, or from any telephone by dialing 641-793-7117? Or call into your favorite show toll-free at 866-37-TRUTH. Uncensored talk and news you won't hear in the mainstream media. Truth Frequency Radio, your protection from deception.